Welcome to Yarnyak. How you guys doing tonight? It's Tuesday. Tuesday in January. It's a Tuesday in January.
Yeah. The second Monday of the week.
Right? Welcome to Yarnyak, where we yak about yarn and fiber crafts and pretty much anything to do with either one of those things. I'm Kimmer.
I'm Carla.
And we are coming to you from the Stash in Baldwin, Wisconsin, which is our local yarn shop. So welcome. Tonight we are yakking about our favorite crochet and knit blanket styles and patterns. So what's really cool about this episode is that Carla and I spent a little time and we put links up on our Yarnyak page on our website for all kinds of different patterns that we really like, places to get started, some free, some paid, as well as a few links to some stitches that make fast, fun, pretty blankets. It's just a place to get you started. So we're going to talk about blanket styles and some of our favorite things about the links that we put up tonight. But first, we're going to tell you what we've been working on this week.
What you doing?
I'm doing another wrap for our charity drive, the YPC. YPC 23 this year. This is our fourth charity drive for the Stash. We're on a roll. Yeah. We're on a roll.
Yep, it's great.
This one's really awesome. So if you are curious about our annual charity drive and want to know if you might be able to help with it, you can see information about that as well on our website. If you click on the YPC 23 button on the top of our homepage, and then to see our Yarnyak page, just go to the very top header and click on Yarnyak, and it'll take you right to our Yarnyak page. So visit the website tonight and see what you think. Our website, Addie, is www. Don't laugh at me. I did not say extra W's tonight. www.shopthestashbusters.com. So anyway, what are you working on this week?
I am also working on another wrap.
So this is hers is completely different than mine. So you show yours and tell them
and
what
you're going to show me yours? No, I'm just kidding. I am doing it's called the block stitch, and it's in Tunisian.
Yeah.
And I've got some roll going on here, but I'll straighten that out at the end.
It's really pretty. It looks like stained glass. I
really like it too.
Yeah. And it's nice and dense.
It's squishy.
It's a very non-holy fabric.
So I'm using a solid color and then one that has some gradient, but it's
striping.
Yes, but it's actually the striping.
Yeah, block striping.
Yeah.
So block striping is when the color changes are really, really, really long. So it ends up almost being like color blocking, depending on what you're doing.
Which is what we're doing here with this one. So yeah, pretty exciting.
Yeah,
I enjoy it. So
mine is a triangle shawl wrap using the cluster stitch. I put a tutorial up on our Facebook page about how to start a cluster stitch triangle wrap so that you don't need a pattern and you can make it any size you want.
Look at this. I wish you could feel this. This is so squishy. Oh my gosh.
It's a super easy way to make a triangle shawl and not have to do a bunch of counting for your increasing or anything like that. The stitch gets kind of, you remember how we were talking about muscle memory and speed? So this stitch has a lot of muscle memory and speed, but it does get a little tedious as you get to the larger size. So I actually finished the cluster stitch portion of this wrap, and now I am adding a wide rib stitch border that will form the arm part, and add some sides to it. And I said in my tutorial that if I did that, I would post an additional tutorial on how to do that, because instead of working around it in the same shape, you actually work out, and that lets you work out away from it like this. And so I'm going to go way out, and then as I work my way down, the sides will get shorter, and that will widen it without lengthening it.
Oh, nice.
So it won't have to hang down to the back of your knees.
Yeah, so it's long enough. And I was thinking that it was long enough, but it could,
but it could be quite a bit wider, right? And basically the key to how you do this just involves, if you look carefully, you'll see that I put a double crochet chain 1 mesh stitch around the edge of my cluster stitch.
I like that.
And so what you do is, after I make this row going out here, if you can tell what I'm saying by how I'm gesturing while I hold this, then when I come back to it, I will join in this next slot that I made. And then I will slip up to this one and join on and come back out. So
Nice.
you work in rows this way, but when you work over here, you just hook into this one and make it part of your first stitch of your next row.
And I noticed that when you put this edge here on, that you actually worked in between.
I did, in the spaces,
nice.
because it makes it keeps it really even, so that you don't chance any buckling or rippling when you do this edge. So
because there's a lot going on.
So I will try.
Nice.
There's a lot going on right now at the stash, my friends, but I will try to get a tutorial on how to do this edge up if I can.
It's beautiful.
But even if you don't do the edge, you can just keep going with the cluster stitch until it's as big as you want it to be. There's nothing wrong with a big long shawl at all.
Nope.
Just for
Just
my purposes. For my purposes for this, I wanted it wider without it getting any longer, and that's kind of the solution to that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that's what I'm doing. I also want to finish it because we got some new yarn today, and I really, really, really want to work it a lot. I'm not telling you, you'll have to look at your newsletter or stop in the shop. But I think it's going to be my new favorite yarn.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I'll tell you that much.
So anyway, that's what we've been doing this week. If you want to see that, there's also pictures and notes about what we're working on our Yarnyak page on our website. So anyways, so our favorite blankets, that's our episode tonight. We wanted to talk a little bit about it's wintertime and everybody wants to make Afghans and blankets. It's also almost baby blanket season. I've already had quite a few people in who are picking up yarns because they've got a new family member on the way, whether it's a grandchild or an Easter nephew or whatever. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about, I actually don't have any baby blankets on my list. I'm not like, I don't have people to make baby blankets for per se, but I occasionally make one and put it out for sale in the store. So, but yeah, we both had some go to, like, oh, I want to make a blanket. Which one do you want to make? This one. I like this one, how it turns out or whatever. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about that tonight. So basically, there's 2 types of blankets. Whether you're knitting or crocheting, it really doesn't matter. There's 2 basic styles of blankets. One is a motif blanket. Just means that you make smaller pieces and then join them together to make a big fabric, like a blanket. And that can be lots of different things, including granny squares, but certainly not limited to granny squares. And then there's solid state blankets, which is just means you're working in rows. You may do wildly different things in each row, but when you work row to row to row to row and get to the other end of however many rows you're making, you've made a solid blanket and you're not joining anything extra onto it. Okay, that's basically it. The 2 types of blankets.
And join as you go blanket is still considered a motif and not a solid state.
Yep, because even though you're joining as you go and you're making a solid piece of fabric, you're still making individual pieces that must be joined together in order to make a blanket. So that's not that it matters. You can call it whatever you want, but we're just trying to differentiate a little bit for you.
Yummy.
Yes, so you learn things. It's not why you watch Yarnyak. Besides to laugh at me, so you can learn things.
Yes.
So, motifs are any small parts made and joined together to create larger fabric. In granny squares are a perfect example of that, as well as I'm sure you've seen like the Annie's heirloom sampler blanket pattern. That's a really good example of a sampler pattern. So back in the day, when they would teach you how to cross stitch or knit or crochet or any of those things, often what you would do is work small projects or samples to learn things and then put them together to make something bigger. And a sampler blanket is that exact thing.
Yep.
You learn to make, different stitches, and usually in 5x5 or bigger squares. And then you join those squares together to make a blanket. Some of them are breathtaking. They're so beautiful. Some of them are definitely not new people learning how to crochet. The stitches are somewhat complex. Some of them are really simple, and those are just as pretty. So, I like, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So the pros of a motif blanket are color creativity, I think. You get to play a lot with color if you want to when you do a motif blanket. And also you get that super fast, satisfying, quick finish feeling because you finish something small. You have that sense of accomplishment there. I did one, you know. So even though you have to do many, many more to make a blanket and put them together, you still have that like instant gratification of finishing something as you go along. And I really, really like that. And then of course there's the stunning array of choices in motifs. There's so many crochet motifs out there. It's not even funny. Like there's so many. I don't think you could do them all in your whole entire life. You could try. I'm trying. I'm working on it. I have a goal. It's a goal. And then, you know,
it's good to have goals.
Yeah, I agree. And then small pieces too, that you can take them anywhere. It's like doing dishcloths. You can pack the supplies to make 5 or 10 motifs in a bag and go anywhere with it. And it's just a little bag, you know, and when they're finished, it's a little stack in your little bag, unless you're making like big ones. But I'm just saying, like, it's a very portable project. So the cons of a motif blanket are,
okay, number 1 in my book is having to put it all together. Just saying. Sorry.
It's on the list. You want to keep going?
Oh,
go ahead.
Sure. Okay.
I'm teasing.
Yeah.
You can do the solid state. That was yours anyway.
I know.
Your choice.
Yeah.
I'll finish motifs.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Fast turnover of pieces. It may, when you do a motif, especially if it's a small one, especially if it's new to you, the fast turnover of those pieces might mean that it takes a little longer for muscle memory, what we were talking about last week, to kick in. So you may not be as fast on a motif at first as you would be on, say, a stitch set on a solid state blanket.
You might have to carry your pattern along with you longer.
You may have to check and recheck your pattern, how to start it, what do I do on this round, et cetera, et cetera. Unless it's, you know, something you've done a million times already. So that's kind of a medium sized, you know, con. Changing colors, stopping and starting, does take extra time. No matter what you do, you have to snip and start, snip and start, snip and start. So we are not even talking about weaving in ends yet. We're just talking about stopping and starting with a new color. You get very, very fast at that if you work on motifs a lot, but it does take extra time to do that.
You're correct.
If you don't like that and you don't want to do that, try doing solid color motifs and just changing color after the whole motif is complete. In other words, do a blue one and then do a red one instead of doing one that has 4 colors on, you know, in one individual motif. That's always an option. You do not have to change color every round in a motif. Some people really like the way that looks, but you can achieve a similar effect by simply just doing a solid color motif and then changing color on the next one.
Yeah, there's no rules.
There's no rules. There is absolutely no rules. Except for that you have to weave in your ends. Because it looks like poo-poo if you don't weave in your ends, okay? It looks bad. Don't spend all that time and not weave in your ends.
Right.
So I stand on my original and constant advice, weave in your ends as you go. So many ends though can get overwhelming. Some people do a join as you go row and they weave in the ends on that row. I prefer on motif work to weave in my ends as I go every round, but that's me. I'm not going to beat you with it. Joining. Some people really, really hate to join squares. So I highly recommend that you learn a join as you go method that you're comfortable with, that you can remember, that you like, to speed that up a little bit. You can at least do rows at a time and then, you know, singly join those rows if you need to, but it will make it go a little faster. And usually join as you go method is your last round anyway, so it makes your blanket grow quickly if you do a JGO, which is what that acronym means, join as you go. So yeah, that's kind of my fascination with for me it's all the color theory. I can't, you know how I am. I can't bear it. Color. If I see a kind of yarn like the one we just got today that has a stunning array of color choices, I have to make something out of it that lets me do this. So
with the most amount of colors possible.
With as many of the colors as possible.
Yep.
So it is not weird for me to go to a yarn shop, find a yarn I like, a yarn shop, not mine, someone else's yarn shop. We did that on our trip, and for me to buy all the colors, all of them, so that I can make
got all of them.
something out of it, like a blanket, because
she's cray.
Because I'm because I have a thing. I'm fascinated with color. Fascinated with
She
it.
does a good job.
So.
She'll set up little color swatches around, and it's like, oh, I have to have that in my life.
I just like, some people don't see color the same way I do, so I just like to show, like, look how good this looks together. You could make something out of this colorway. It looks really nice, It's so it might be slightly evil, but it is meant well. I mean well.
From the heart.
It is.
Yeah.
I just want you to love color as much as I do.
And with mine, I just like with even this one, I bought the blue. Just the blue. I bought a bunch of the blue. I was just going to do a wrap that was blue.
Yeah.
And then I happened to have something in my yarn stash. I was like, oh, I wonder if that would go with it. Let's try it.
You're getting better about that.
Sure, yeah. And it did turn out. So I was happy. Pretty proud of myself.
Yeah, I know we've had a few people request that we do a show about color theory, but again, I'm not entirely sure that I can explain it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can explain it. Sometimes it's one of those things for me.
Because you can see it.
No.
Yeah, you can see it.
I could try to explain it, but it might be boring.
Right.
I don't know.
We'll see. Well, we might revisit that in the future.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I haven't forgotten the request, those that asked. I haven't forgotten about it. I have been percolating on how I would do a show on that in a half an hour. I'm not sure. So anyway, the other kind of blanket is solid state.
Solid state.
And Carla is going to tell us about that.
That's how I exist most of my life.
In a solid state.
Thank God for that. I know, right?
I don't want to step on ooey gooey Carla.
Goo. I'm just a pile of goo. That's the summer when it gets humid.
Yeah, me too.
So, okay. So a solid state refers to any blanket that is worked in a row fashion. And it can be virtually any stitch or stitch set. The difference is that it is worked in rows, not parts to be joined. And those rows can be just across, but they can also be around. Mm-hmm. They can be squared around, but it's in a row. You're doing a row and you...
Yeah, like a granny square blanket where you literally work from the center out in a big square.
Exactly.
That's a solid state blanket. It's not joined motifs together.
Even though it's a granny square. Yep. It's just a giant one.
It's just a giant one.
Right. So the pros of solid state is that there's no joining. Okay.
For some people, that is a big pro.
The only joining is if you use different color yarns, so it's not like you have to, you don't. There's possibly less ends depending on the color design. And, and like I said earlier, there's no rules. You can do what you want.
You can do whatever you want.
Right?
It's one of the best things about yarning.
Yes.
You make your own rules.
Exactly. That's what I love about it, being the rebel leader that I am. Yeah. So again, there's a stunning array of stitch sets to choose from, and they can be very repetitive and produce immediate muscle memory and speed. But also, you could do one of those ones where it's a different stitch every row, and I love those too. I think those are
pretty, I think, and fun.
Absolutely. So the cons of solid states would be, oh my gosh, yeah. So the blankets can quickly get too large and heavy to be portable, and that is an issue.
They get to the point where you basically almost have to, be under it on your couch or lay it on a table to work on it because it's just too monstrous to.
And it can feel slow. It can feel like your progress is really slow,
especially if you're working on a big blanket.
Yes, a big one. So and sometimes you get bored with it because it's too large. Yeah. I started one several years ago now that will fit over and has drape on a king size bed.
I've done one of those in my whole life.
And it's from the floor up to my chin, but it's not tall enough yet. It's not long enough.
Yeah.
But I've had other projects, so it's in a tote. And I literally cannot work on it in the summertime. It is way too hot. Way too hot.
I made one spaghetti scrap blanket, which I'll talk about in a minute, one time, and I was very sick, and I was in bed, whatever, on my couch for probably 2.5, 3 months. And I took every end and bit and bob and yarn without a label and some with that I had. And I just like, whoop, whoop, and I made this oversized, king-sized. I told Jason I was just going to go until I ran out of yarn.
Yeah.
And it ended up being, it hangs down to the floor on both sides of our California king bed. And then it goes all the way up over the pillows and hangs off the bottom end of the mattress by this much.
Yep,
it's a monster. But here's the con. I actually cannot, I have to bring that blanket to the laundromat and it goes in one of those like 3 or 4 load big huge washers and fills it. It's one load.
And I was going to suggest
cost me
that
$40
that's
to wash and dry that blanket.
That's a huge con.
And since we have it on our bed in the wintertime, it costs me $40 quite a few times to wash it, because it's also my husband's favorite blanket, because it weighs a metric ton.
Yes.
And when you crawl under it, you're almost like pressed into sleep. You just down you go because it's so heavy.
Yes.
But it was fun and it's pretty.
Yeah,
You've seen it.
I have, and pretty. It is. I have.
It is literally every color.
Yeah, I have a little bit of envy on that. Yeah, I do love it.
But that's what I had to do to make that.
Yeah.
I had to be sick and restricted movement and no energy to do anything, literally anything. So I just binge watched TV all day, all night, and crocheted.
Yeah,
so.
And that's the perfect time to do it. You were productive, even though you weren't
taking
feeling
advantage
well.
of a situation.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anyway, so my favorite blanket style, in case you didn't already know, is a motif blanket. I prefer to work in motifs rather than solid state. I will do solid state blankets, but my preference is almost always going to be designing something in a square and then making a bunch and putting them together, because I love to see how each square looks different when I change the color. If you were around last summer when we did the Huga sunburst blanket for the bags, and I made a blanket out of it, the blankets in the shop. If you were around last summer watching me do that, you might remember that I was pretty much obsessed with color.
Oh my gosh.
that. I would just line them up and take them and line them up, and I was, ooh, I'm gonna do this. Ooh, and then I'd walk around the store and be like, I need a blue, but not that one, but not the, what do I need? I mean, it was, I get a little
focus.
Zeroed,
Yeah.
Tight focus, but it was really fun and I love how it turned out. So anyway, my favorite is motifs. And Carla's favorite.
Mine is solid state. Now, don't get me wrong. I love doing motifs and I love intricate motifs. I love ones that use the different yarns and that, the different colors. I do love doing motifs and I love learning them. However,
you don't want to have to make 104.
Well,
or more.
Try more on that one. But I also have 3 containers with motifs in it for a blanket to be put together.
Because you get stuck at the joining part.
I just don't. I'm got all my stuff done. I used all my yarn. I'm done with those, and I want to be done. Because with a solid state, when I'm done, I'm done. Okay,
yeah, you're done.
And that's what I like about the solid state. I do like to see it build.
I don't
that far.
I'm not gonna sit here and like tell people that I love joining. I don't love it, but I do love the last joining method, which I think is going to be the last one I ever learned, because the one that I learned and that I taught when we did the bag class, which was for that sunburst blanket, that Jago method is the bomb. And it goes really fast and it's really easy to understand once you get the hang of it. It is, I like it because it's flat on both sides. It doesn't create a ridge. Most joining methods create some kind of grid or ridge, and this one doesn't. So I am a big fan of it, and it can be applied to most square style motifs. So ever since I learned that one, now I'm not scared. Now I'm like, bring it. Let's do squares.
I know, and I have to set a date for you
to learn that one,
because I was unable to make that class, but and I'm excited to learn that. I had a few
people come in and say, "Can you please show me that method, because that I like the way that looks and I want to learn how to do that one." So Yeah, and it's not
Awesome.
my method. I learned it from Mallory Crawl, which is where that free pattern comes from. She does have a video on that pattern page, a tutorial video on how to do the joining method. So I learned it from her. Some people have a harder time learning from a tutorial video, and some people don't. You know, if you watch the tutorial video, you may well be able to just grasp it right from there, no problem. And if not, you know, you can always come in and I can try to show you. I could try. But yeah, it's a really good Jago method. And actually the difference between that one and many others is literally one little thing. And I would have never thought of it. And I think of lots of crazy stuff because I make up stuff all the time. And I would have never thought of that. But it's as soon as I did it, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yep.
So anyway, so we're also going to talk about the best blanket yarns, only we're not going to because guess what? There's no such thing. You can make a blanket out of anything you want. Many people have preferences. A lot of people prefer a heavier weight yarn, worsted or higher for a blanket because it goes faster. That seems to be the driving reason behind using heavier weight yarns for blankets. Some people prefer a lightweight. The people that do prefer lightweight yarns seem to prefer them for the lacier, lighter weight blankets and for baby blankets. So that seems to be what that comes down to. And then the second qualification that most people have is that it's soft. So we have a third thing to throw in there for you. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about my ginormous spaghetti blanket. We recommend using machine washable yarn. You may not think that you have to wash a blanket very often. Do me a favor and walk over to your couch, to the favorite blanket that everybody uses in your living room, and smell it.
Yeah.
Especially if you have pets, which I do, a dog and cats. Blankets need to be washed more often than one might think. They get a funk. That's all I'm going to say. They get a funk. Especially if, think about when you are curling up under this blanket.
Yeah.
End of the day or the beginning of the day. Not our cleanest times of the day, usually. When we feel good, after you eat, when you're eating, there's the
I'm just gonna sit here with my blankie and drink my coffee.
Blankets should be machine washable when at all possible. If you're gonna make a blanket that's not machine washable, you should really carefully consider how accessible that blanket is going to be in your house or where it's going and what it's going to be used for. If it needs to be hand washing a blanket made out of yarn is not easy. It's not a small thing, and it can take soak up a lot of water. A lot of people don't have a sink big enough to hand wash a blanket and get it rinsed properly. So something to consider. Blankets, I really highly recommend that you can throw them through the wash.
Because once again, there are no rules, and you can do what you want.
Do what you want.
However, you end up living with your consequences as well.
Like making a 1.5 size California King blanket that weighs seriously like 60 pounds.
Exactly. What would you do without the laundromat?
Oh, I don't know, right? No kidding.
So with all that, Kimmer, what is your favorite yarn?
My favorite yarn weight for blankets is anything worsted or Aran, and made out of acrylic or cotton or wool or a combination of those things. Again, machine washable. I am a really big fan of acrylic cotton for lighter feeling blankets. That cotton is actually heavy, but when you mix it with acrylic, it takes some of the weight off of the cotton, and it's a little more breathable. I like to make motif blankets out of a cotton acrylic yarn for summertime or springtime or whatever. But most of the time, if I'm making a blanket, it's a warm or a cold weather blanket, a warm blanket. And then I'm a big fan of acrylic and wool blends or superwash wool. Superwash wool can get a little spendy for a blanket, but there are some more affordable options for superwash wool out there. Barocco makes wool, which is very affordable for superwash. It's like $14-15 for 200 yards. That's compared to other superwash wools, which come in somewhere between $18 and $24 for the same amount of yardage. So and it's a very nice yarn. But also, again, acrylic and wool blends. Again, Barocco has vintage. The yarn that we're bringing in to the shop here in the next week or so is from Sirdar. It's Hayfield. Their acrylics and their acrylics with wool are really, really nice. Like, I'm kind of stoked about that. I really like Hayfield. So there's lots of different acrylic and acrylic wool blend yarns you can use for blankets out there. You definitely don't have to use the cheapest yarn you can find and have it still be affordable. You can choose something nice and have it still be pretty affordable. So what about you? What's your favorite yarn?
I'm along, you know, I like what you have mentioned. I really don't have a preference.
No.
Because, you know, there's no rules.
There's no rules. She's the rebel leader.
I am the rebel leader. There's no rules. And if I find something I like, I'm going to try it, you know?
I think that the thing I'm always tripping over is time.
The
lighter the weight of yarn, the longer it takes to make it.
I'll be honest here. I haven't made one that's been super light yarn unless it's been a baby blanket. And I actually have been contemplating doing that because I like the drape and I want that big long blanket with the drape where I can wrap it around me, sit at the kitchen counter if I want in the morning and have my coffee.
You don't look like the abominable snowman wrapped in your blanket.
Exactly. And I could also take it camping and maybe sit outside.
A little lighter weight.
Yes, exactly. So, you know,
you could try playing in the Sport DK area on a bigger hook and make a more open, airy blanket, maybe.
I don't know. I've just been my brain's been tweaking over it, so we'll see what happens.
It's funny how every year that you yarn, no matter how many years you have been yarning, every year brings some kind of growth. You try something, you do something, you tackle something that used to seem completely overwhelming and absolutely out of the question to you. Every year, it doesn't matter, you know, no matter where you are in it, every year you'll do something new or different.
And you know what did it for me was that linen yarn.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I know.
Because I touch it now and it's
so
like,
soft.
Yeah, and it's so malleable. I just can't even.
Absolutely. We wanted to note a few blanket making tools that might make your life a little bit easier if you go to it, make it blankets, especially if you're doing motif type blankets. You can, but don't try. You should have a measuring tape, some kind of measuring tape, fabric measuring tape, not a construction measuring tape. That helps you size your blankets, especially if you're not using a pattern, if you're using what we would more call a recipe or instructions, where it just says chain the width you want, and then do this. So I have a few customers. I won't mention any names, but if you're watching, feel free to chime in. You know who you are, who have come to me and said, Kimmer,
what does this mean?
I did this and look at this blanket. It is the size of my house. It didn't look that big when I made the chain. And I held it up and it didn't look that big. And I'm here to tell you, when you make a chain and you put stitches in it, it grows. I don't know how, okay? I can't tell you the science, but it does. It grows. It gets bigger this way, not just this way. And the other thing is some people tend to overstretch their chain way out to try to measure it, or they don't stretch it out at all. So it is, if you make a chain that is approximately what you think you should make, lay it flat on the floor and then run a fabric tape next to it. Don't stretch it out, but when you lay it out, pull it firmly and get it nice and straight with no twists in it. And then do your first row. Or if you foundation, which is chainless starting, with a foundation, stitch like half double crochet, you can just lay that out and you don't have to do the second check because it's got a row of stitches in it, setting it up. And measure that. That will tell you what you need to know. How many inches wide is this bad boy going to be? And it will tell you if it's not big enough or if it's too big. And that's in plenty of time to pull back out and make some adjustments.
And if you decide not to use the measuring tape, just realize that this is your life now. You will be doing this until it's done.
Yeah. It's also super useful if you're doing motifs of any kind, any kind of square or even round motif for consistency. Especially if you are scrapping, so you are yarn hopping, it will help you huge to make sure that your finished motif is the same size as the other motifs, and it will tell you if you're checking, consistently checking your rounds, if you need to make an adjustment. Maybe the yarn you're using on this particular one, especially again if you're scrap busting, is a little bit smaller, less grist, just a slightly less thickness that is making it, overall end up being, a half inch or an inch or more smaller, even though it's the exact same pattern. That can happen really easily on motifs. So
yep, it was a Tuesday and I was feeling stressed, and now it's this big instead of being this big.
Yeah, it happens. So a measuring tape is a crucial, inexpensive piece of equipment to keep in your project bag, especially when you're working on blankets.
And they're fun because they have really cute ones.
There's tons of really cute ones. So, and then a large eye bent tip steel yarn needle is my favorite type of yarn needle, tapestry needle. That is absolutely necessary for effectively and really strongly weaving in your ends to make sure that they don't slip and come and pop out. Some people like the Bates finishing needle. It is a different animal altogether, but it is also handy. And what I like it for is really, really fat yarn like macro, 7 or higher, the really fat stuff, or basic chenille is another one. Anything that's like this big around, that even with the piece of paper trick, you can't push it through the large eye tapestry needle. They're kind of hard to describe, but basically it's a plastic. It looks sort of like a long diamond. The whole entire center of it is an eye, and it's bendy. You can fit anything through there, but then it has a point, and you can use the point, and it's flat to weave it through your stitches and pull that big fat yarn with it.
It's almost like a bobby pin.
Yeah,
it's wider and longer.
We had some before, and we have more coming. We don't have any right now, or I just show you, but those exist as well. And having 1 or 2 of those in your project bag comes in real handy anytime that you're working with really big chompy yarn.
It works really well.
So that you're not just crocheting over your end in a way that it can pop back out later, especially after washing. You're actually weaving it in through some stitches and getting it really secure. That tool is really important for that. And then there's blocking mats and blocking pins, depending on how I want to use the word tedious, but depending on how meticulous you want to be or need to be for what you're doing, blocking can really assist in getting unruly types of yarns and stitch sets to lay down flat and straighten out and line up for joining. So, and it also can present a finished product that looks quite a bit more finished if you care about that. I'm not saying you have to care about that. But it is useful for joining to block your squares. WPI tool, wraps per inch tool, can be real handy if you're scrap blanketing, because you could be using all kinds of different yarns. You may not have yarn labels for them anymore. Many of us do not have yarn labels for them anymore. They are mystery yarns. And WPI tool lets you just wrap it around, and it tells you what the yarn is, what weight it is, by how many wraps it took per inch, per the inch, the little gap on it. So those are not expensive. They might seem a little expensive for what they do, but if you're working a scrap project, they are worth having one. And then a clicky.
Oh my gosh.
A clicky. You may not think you need a clicky, but let me tell you something. If you crochet in the round ever, you need a clicky. Clicky is a huge help to counting, especially when increasing or decreasing. Knitters often use clickies to tell them if they're on a knit row or a purl row or an increase row or a decrease row. Crocheters can use a clicky when working in the round to tell you all kinds of things, like if you are on an increase row, how many you need to increase. There's different ways you can use it by pushing the buttons to tell you different things, but it is an indispensable little tool.
I used to do the hashtag, the little hashes thing. I used to do all kinds of different things to do this, but there's nothing more satisfying than
just to tell you what round you're on. You finish a round and you click, and you don't even have to pause for about a half a second to do that.
And there's no rules on this either. You can either finish the round and click, or click. Well, you would anyway, I guess. Never mind. But I click forward, so when I start,
you
some
click.
people click at the end of They click that row at the end.
But it's
I
like
click at the
turning, you
beginning.
guys. Whatever you decide to do, do
Keep
it the
doing
same
it.
way every time on
Yep.
every project.
Yep.
Don't get creative
But
and change it
I
because
have
you'll
found
forget.
I found this to be very satisfying, and I don't forget to click it.
No,
because I love the
You
click.
want to hear that? It's like rewarding a dog with a treat. We're just dogs.
I just love it.
So those are some tools and tricks that you can use when you're making blankets that will help you maybe along your way. There's lots of other doodads and tchotchkes that you can get in yarn for yarning. And many of you may have some of the things I already listed off, but if you don't, those are things that if you want to sit down and make some blankets, again, especially Modus or scrap blankets, that those are handy, useful things to have around. So I am going to run over my favorite pattern ideas, and so is Carla, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on it because you can go to our Yarnyak page and click them all and look at them.
Click them all.
Click there. Yes, they're all on there. And even some extra ones that we're not going to talk about tonight are on there. So I like probably one of my favorite easy ones to do is a bordered corner to corner. So the cathedral throw that's on the back of the couch in the window that people always want to look at, a lot of you and other customers as well. All that is a corner to corner blanket. I made a square and then I bordered it with the cluster stitch. And then I did this fancy looking, but not hard. It's called the cathedral border because it looks like the top of a cathedral church. And it's
beautiful.
It's like an oversized, like that shape.
Onion dome.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That's exactly what it looks like. So that's probably one of my favorite ones because it's easy to do, but it looks like it was hard, and it's kind of eye-catching, especially if you use bright colors, different colors to make it. The Hygge Sunburst blanket is another favorite of mine. That square is really easy to do. A lot of you did that with me this summer. The joining method for that is also worth its weight in gold to know how to do, but that's a fun one if you want to burn up some scrap because you you don't need very much to do any one of the rounds on that
there's
square.
No rules on the colors,
and it's a pretty quick square. A simple granny square blanket, another favorite of mine. Again, you can use tons of scrap up on it because there's no rules. I also like to do large 10 or 12 inch squares, whether it's a sampler where you just do a stitch set on the whole square, or whether it's a design like the dalliance, the duckbill dalliance square, which I have listed on the website. That's a personal favorite of mine. That looks amazing in a cotton acrylic yarn. Amazing. And then, of course, spaghetti blankets, which are the ones where you make weight by just using any, like if you have a fingering and a DK, put them together. You just made worsted and go. And you just go till you run out of yarn and you just keep going. You do those in a simple stitch, like half double or double. You don't do anything fancy with those. The color is the point.
The color's the fancy.
The color will overwhelm any kind of texture that you try to do. You won't even see it because you're not planning colors and you're not plotting rows. This you can run out of yarn this far into a row and then not run out of yarn again until up here, or 5 stitches later. It just depends. And then scrap samplers are more planned. You do those one color, one stitch, one row. So those are fun because, or maybe 2 rows, depending on what it is, but those are fun because they highlight in one color a stitch and then you quick do another one, and you can take 6 stitches and just alternate them, or you can literally try and do a whole blanket without repeating a stitch. There's a challenge for you. Either way, there is a cool little tip trick video on the Yarnyak page about when you want to use a whole bunch of scrap yarns and ends up together. There's a little tutorial on there about a way you can do that without losing your mind and having to weave in about 1,000 ends. So you'll have to jump on the website to see that. Fabulous. You go, Carla.
All right, I'm just going to run through mine really quick.
We're running late.
Yeah. So my all-time favorite is the simplest. It's the cozy stripe blanket from Attic 24.
I do like that one too.
And I love it.
I do too.
Alec, you are alternating every couple of rows. So you do 2 rows of double crochet and then you do 2 granny stripe rows. And that big one that I have that I'm making that fits over the king is I did that this far without doing any doubles on my yarn. And then I started doing some, doubling them up. But
Gotcha.
But yeah, it goes super fast, and it's very pleasing to me. So the other one is the lemon peel stitch, and I like the texture on that. It adds a little bit of texture without being super crazy to do. It's all just depending on how you do it. Some use single crochets, some use slip stitches, some use half doubles, the double crochet and whatnot. But
it's always a small stitch and a larger stitch.
Yep.
Usually
And then
they're one full stitch height apart.
Yep. And then on your way back, it's normally a half double, depending on whose pattern you use. The other one is the Tunisian one I have is the block stitch, which is this one. And I really like this. It works up really fast. I have a couple of knit ones on there, the chunky knit blanket and the stockinette baby blanket.
That chunky knit blanket, I think I could do that.
I think you could.
I think I could do that. And I'm a beginner knitter.
Yeah.
But I looked at that and I was like,
I'm not a super advanced knitter, but that's what I like, that one. And if I was
going to try to knit a blanket, that's the one I'd try.
And this, the stockinette baby blanket, I believe is the one that has, as you're doing it, you make the border.
Yeah. Yep.
So that one,
has a
I love that.
Border.
Yes, that's the one. So I love that one because it's all bordered like a picture frame.
Yeah, and that helps the stockinette stitch lay down flat and not
absolutely
curl too.
Yes.
So it's a one and done though. You do your seed stitch as you're working the blanket.
Yep. And then you're done.
And then you're finished. When you're finished, you're finished.
Yeah. So, anybody who's a newer knitter, I would totally recommend either of those two patterns because I enjoy them because I am not super advanced. So, but yeah, those are what I have on there. Check the website. You can click on any of the links.
Yep, they're all there. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of Yarn Yak about blankets and blanket styles and our favorite patterns. So you can check it out on our website, like I said earlier, at www.shopthestashbusters.com and just click Yarn Yak up at the top of the page. You can also ask us questions anytime by email at askyarnyak@gmail.com. You can visit our website and check out our Yarn Yak page for links and patterns from tonight's show. And you can also subscribe and ring the bell on our YouTube channel and see all of our other tutorials and things that we have posted besides Yarn Yak episodes on our YouTube channel. You can also watch past Yarn Yak episodes on our YouTube channel. If you missed the one about, for example, how to pick a crochet hook or how to make yarn weights, demystified. Some of those episodes people found so helpful, I guess, which was cool.
Absolutely.
The fiber breakdown also has been watched a lot.
Really good.
Yeah,
yes.
I was like, wow, people really were watching that one. Yep. So that's cool. We love it when you guys love what we're talking about because we never are for sure until we see how many people watch something. If we're just sitting here going blah 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 blah, or if you're liking it. So I love to see when you watch it if you liked it or not. That really helps us figure out what you want to hear.
Absolutely.
If you like content like this, you can check out our Buy Me a Coffee page. The address is in the description of tonight's episode on Facebook, and it will be in the same description on our YouTube upload. We really appreciate any donations that anyone can give us towards making this show. It's not something that anyone's getting paid for, and it's not that we need to get paid, but it does help offset some of the costs like cameras and lighting and all that nonsense to do the show. So tune in next week for episode 17, The Yarn Habit. Why it's so good for us. You're going to love this one, you guys. I'm going to give you 1,000 reasons to give people when they say,
fabulous.
Why do you have so much yarn?
Right? I love it.
You'll have an answer for everybody. Everybody.
All the things.
All the things. So until then, happy yarning, my friends, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
You're the best.
Yarn.